All right. Hey guys, welcome back. This is It's a Classic. My name is Tyler. This is my mom,
Hi, I'm Elizabeth.
and we both love movies. So for us, if we like a movie, we say it's a classic, even if it's not actually a classic. So we are going to be going through Dante's Peak today, and we chose that because we both love disaster movies. And October's coming up, and a lot of people would be doing, scary movies, horror movies. That's not really our vibe. So we are going to be doing disaster movies, and to start it off, we are going to do Dante's Peak.
Dante's Peak. Oh my goodness. Thank you, Tyler, for choosing this movie. It is near and dear to my heart because I believe that this is a recount of the explosion of Mount Saint Helens, the eruption, sorry, of Mount Saint Helens. Uh, and there are many ways I can point out how they mirrored that, and we will also in this movie. But before we do that, do you mind if I just jump in and tell you about Mount
Go
Saint
for it.
Helens? Because I am a disaster nerd, and this disaster happened when I was 10 years old, and this sparked my love for
Yeah.
all things disaster. Was the explosion of Mount St. Helens because I got to watch it firsthand. It was one of the most spectacular things I've ever seen in my entire life. So okay, let me just get into it. I am old. I just had a birthday, so we have to use some glasses. Okay, so let me just start by saying a few little deets here. Mount St. Helens on May 18th of 1980. I know how old I am. A 5.1 earthquake triggered the largest landslide recorded in human history, and we have evidence of the landslide, which I'm going to provide for you, where let's see here. The eruption was heard 700 miles away, and the blast flattened trees 19 miles away. So if you can imagine things in your life that are 19 miles away, and all of the trees were flattened. The heat from the lava that exploded out of Mount St. Helens was enough to melt the glacier that was there, and it melted 46 billion gallons of water that flowed into the valley, causing a lanai. We'll talk about that more later as well. Um, Unfortunately, 57 people lost their life that day, including several people from the United States Geological Survey team. It devastated 229 square miles. That is from Rochester, Minnesota to Madison, Wisconsin. That square destroyed. Destroyed. It flattened timber and the timber that because the logging industry was so big back then, and the logging it didn't stop that day either, and the logs were pushed into Spirit Lake. So during the 1980, before the eruption, they were monitoring this peak because there was a bunch of earthquakes that were going on and a bunch of activities that were happening along the way. And so this film is going to mirror some of those things that were happening, some of those conversations and all that as well. But the bulge that was happening on the side of the mountain, which was the magma coming out, and there were cracks because of the fact that the landslide happened, it opened up the side, and so instead of the mountain exploding like a normal pyroclastic volcano would explode, it exploded laterally. And the lateral it removed 1,306 feet of mountain. That is as big as 300 football fields. That's incredible, right? Once the side of the, this is a quote from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association, the NOAA. They monitor these things. Once the side of the mountain was removed from the blast, the volcanic gas explosion out of the side of the volcano produced a lateral blast. The blast traveled at speeds of 670 miles an hour, overtaking the landslide. So the blast overtook the landslide because you had the landslide. The blast came out and extended 19 miles. That's how much that lateral blast went, 19 miles. In the areas closest to the volcano, so from the volcano to the first 8 miles, the blast destroyed everything, trees, houses, wildlife, and there was nothing left there. It was barren. There are pictures of it. It is barren. There is nothing there. So for 8 miles, there was nothing. From 8 to 13 miles, the volcano blasted, or like I said, laid the trees down like toothpicks for up to 13 miles, and then from 13 miles past that, it blasted the forest, so there was nothing but like just sticks standing straight up. Most of the, like I said before, most of the 57 people that were killed in the eruption included one of the volcanologists, David Johnson, was killed by asphyxiation in the blast and hot gases and so forth. And then 200 homes and 185 miles of road were destroyed by the mudslide, the glacier melting. So there you go. Now let's get into that movie.
Well, thank you so much for that. I always love the history lessons that you give for these. They are fantastic.
You're welcome.
Okay, so I'm really glad that you brought up Mount Saint Helens because
Yeah.
they made this movie to mirror Mount Saint Helens. So it's not a coincidence that you saw that in there. Even
Yeah.
down to how they made the mountain look at the beginning and how they made the mountain look at the end of the movie
That's
are
true.
mirrored of actual photography of Mount St. Helens before and after. So okay, the similarities between the two, between Dante's Peak and Mount St. Helens. So Dante's Peak, that name comes from the book Dante's Inferno, and so they wanted to name this volcano after that. And that was a dormant volcano that nobody expected any activity to come from, similar to Mount St. Helens. And then they started to get readings that kind of drew their attention to it, similar to Dante's Peak. And in different parts of this movie, like when they are looking at these readings and they're setting up equipment, they're filming at this like crater in the movie, and that's actually Mount St. Helens. And different areas in that they're putting up these geological survey equipment and things in the movie, those are real places around Mount St. Helens to make it just really authentic.
I want to point something out about that as well. You had mentioned that to me before I rewatched the movie for this. And so I paid particular attention to some of those shots there. And one of the shots that I noticed, which really gave me like little like happy chills because I love volcanoes, is over time they have been chronologically the growth of this volcano back into its mountain. You know, they've been very closely watching it grow back, and one of the shots there is of the glacier, and the glacier is reforming itself on Mount St. Helens, which has been a huge thing in the life of a volcano. So they put that shot in there. You can see the glacier there.
So I really like that they took a particular notice in Mount St. Helens in this, and that they really
Yeah.
included all of the as many shots as they could, but also keeping it a fictional town is supposed to represent any small town in the shadow of a volcano. So, um, and even the area that they say, this town is up in the Cascades, up in Washington, and that's exactly where Mount St. Helens is, and all these towns that are living in the shadow of volcanoes is just, so even that, like, they could have picked anywhere in the world for this fake town to be, and they said nope, it's going to be in the Cascades because that's where Mount St. Helens is.
Yeah.
um
Funny enough that
yeah,
you say
so
that too, because when they go into like the scene where they're like going into Dante's Peak, it reminded me so much of some of those little towns that we passed through when we're driving through the Rockies, those little mountain towns, doesn't it?
yep,
Like Vale and
yep,
that sort of place. Yeah, it's very nice. So quaint.
yeah, it's very beautiful.
Yeah.
um all right, so this movie was directed by Roger Donaldson. He was actually a geology student, and considered to go into, the field of geology as a career, and then made this movie. So he
Yeah,
really wanted to
it's
make
smart.
things as accurate as possible, uh, with it fitting into a good story. There are some things that don't happen together. Like the pyroclastic cloud, like you mentioned, plus lava flow. Like, there's different things that happen in this movie that don't happen in real life. There's things that um, take a little bit more of a Hollywood twist to it. Um, but
Yes,
for the most
time
part,
frames. If you just remember time frames, because I put how long and how fast these things move, but they had so much time to get ready and get grandma out. I'm like, what?
yeah,
But that's okay. That's
yeah,
Hollywood, and that's licensing rights. And also trying to drive through lava and spinning your tires through lava and then
we'll get
getting out. That was
we'll,
remarkable feat of just who made that truck?
we will get into that scene. Yes.
Oh,
Okay,
please.
so we will. So, this movie was released in 1997, and
Yes.
it was released. It was released 2 months before the movie Volcano. Um, Volcano is one that I owned, and I actually saw that more than I saw this movie. Um, I first saw this movie in like ninth or 10th grade in a science slash geology class that I was taking. Um, and so this was a school movie for me, and Volcano was, the entertainment movie. So I think
Yeah.
it's funny that they were released so close together. So, because of that, this movie was more popular than Volcano. This movie was wildly popular also because it stars Pierce Brosnan, which was James Bond between 95 and '02. And then Linda Hamilton, who played Sarah Connor in the Terminator series. So the two main stars of this movie were gigantic in the '90s.
Huge stars.
Yeah.
They were at
So
Bruce Willis level. So yes, we
yeah,
enjoyed it very much that they came together.
yeah, yeah. It was good. And then the scoring for this movie was done by James Newton Howard. And he's done so many movies, but couple that I wanted to touch on, because they're so good. He's worked a lot with M. Night Shyamalan. His scoring in this movie, I could hear little bits of, from different movies that I love, and so I really liked the score for this movie.
Immediately, I just want to say one thing as we jump into this movie. We know immediately it is a B-rated movie. And how do we know this? Because the very um, educated volcanologist decides to stop what she's doing in the middle of an eruption and look at her data. I thought that was like, oh no, now we know what to expect.
She's obviously gonna die. Spoiler alert for
She's
this,
totally gonna die.
27-year-old movie.
And I
Um,
love the way she dies too, is perfectly epic.
it is. It
and and
is.
her death's performance was beautiful.
And his was but after that point, it cuts to 4 years later. So he gets called to the Cascades, which I said earlier, I really liked that they did that and they filmed there. So it was perfect.
It was perfect, yeah.
Yeah, and this movie, obviously, they didn't film it at the base of a real volcano. Um, they filmed in a small town, and then they had kind of, in the background green screen type stuff where they digitally added in the scenes of the mountains there. Um, some of the models and things of the town, they built a gigantic mountain so that something could be in the background, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah, I like when they introed into the town how they go in, they're having their town festival. It's really exciting and everything seems pretty happy, seem really low key and laid back in this beautiful mountain town. And then
Mhm.
they introduce us to the mayor of this town because she has to give a speech, and she is just not a put together woman. Her child has to guide her in all of her mayoral duties. Even when it comes to
Yep.
remembering the name of the people that she's being introduced by, her child is, it's just so beautifully scripted. I love that. Um, and then we see 007 there in the mix of things, like getting a feel of the town. That's a pretty great intro.
Yeah. Yeah, they do a really good job with showing this is maybe the best place to live, or second best place to live.
Second best, yeah, not the
And
best.
yeah, they it's not like we have any idea going into this movie what the town of Dante's Peak should look like. Um, but it is what we hoped it would look like, if that makes sense. It's very
It's everything we thought
picturesque.
of. I do like how they also show that there are other pieces to this town, not just the parades and the celebrations that are happening, but that there's also really fun places to sneak off to. You know,
Yep.
like the
Yep, they
hot
do
springs.
show. Yeah. The hot so I saw this movie in like ninth or 10th grade, like I said, in science classes. Um and I always forget about the people in the hot spring. Um and it's always jarring, like, oh, they're super dead. I
Well,
mean, that'll come in a little bit,
super.
but
I always think of the people in the hot springs. I always know that they're there and I know that they're coming because I'm waiting for it. Because, I'm weird like that. And I think every time when I see the other scene about them, when that the kids come on, that it's kind
yeah,
of like putting chicken in boiling water. They're cooked.
they're super cooked. Yes.
They're so cooked. Okay, so I did go back a little bit on reality, is that this is a completely plausible thing to happen. That hot springs are heated by geothermal heat. The heat from the Earth's
Mm-hmm.
interior in volcanic areas such as Dante's Peak, water comes in contact with the hot, heated magma of the volcano, and so the hot springs by an active volcano can produce these superheated waters, and it's very dangerous to immerse yourself in that. But I feel like at this moment when these people were going into the hot springs, it was just happening, like, so
Mm-hmm.
unfortunate for them. Unfortunate.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things in this movie that reflect reality. It does heat up. Um, and you have different things that they start to see throughout the area. You've got some dead animals, you've got random dead trees. Um, I love that shot that shows the forest there, and there's like two or three trees that are dead in just little pockets.
Yeah.
And he asks about that, like, what's up with those trees, and it comes off as like, oh, that seems to be a new thing, but whatever. um But of course, he picks up on it right away as, okay, so something's going on because I've seen this
Warning
before. Um,
signs.
and that's an accurate warning sign that we have in our real world, where you'll have pockets of higher sulfur content that's closer to the surface or at the surface that will start killing off wildlife and start killing plant life. And if it's in water, obviously it will make the water more sulfuric and more acidic. um,
Yeah. Interestingly enough, something happened recently. Okay, because I already told you in the beginning that I'm a complete nerd when it comes to this sort of thing. So I've been watching very closely and carefully the volcano over at Yellowstone right there. And just
mhm.
recently, one of the geysers lit up like it hasn't done that in all the times that tourists come out to see it. The geyser just exploded. And people are
Hmm.
so taken aback by this, like, why did that happen? And I'm sorry, but you are standing on a volcano. So it is going to happen. So it's just kind of, I love that they do put these little nuances in this movie too about actual occurrences that do happen around volcanoes.
Yeah, and that's the problem with volcanoes and dormant volcanoes is after a while people forget that it's a volcano. They just think it's a mountain.
They
And
do.
you got Mount Saint Helens that all of a sudden erupted. I mean, there's little warning signs, but people like you and me aren't going to know what those warning signs are. We don't have the equipment to see that ahead of time. So, you've got a lot
That's
of
very
people.
true.
Yeah.
That's very true. But
So
I
it's
do believe that the people that live on those mountains, you get a sense of things. You know what I mean? You sense the animal movements and you sense the earth moving because a precursor to a volcano is an earthquake almost every time. So I think that people can sense it, but those eruptions can happen so quickly that you only have maybe minutes, you know? And I would
yeah.
love to talk about that time frame later in the movie as this volcano
Yeah, for
erupts
sure.
about the time.
Yeah. Um so yeah, they start doing some of these tests around the volcano, and they go into this little crater. It's actually a pretty big one, and I mentioned this earlier, but that crater is Mount St. Helens where they were filming. Um, I enjoy all of the tests that they run, and the equipment that they have set up, and it shows a realism to what geologists would actually be doing.
Yeah, I'd like to touch on that a little bit. Well, I think I did kind of in the beginning when I talked about how many of the USGS gentlemen were lost during the Mount St. Helens eruption. There was a whole entire team that was lost within a minute of the volcano erupting because they were right there. Because I mean, if you're in the business of researching a volcano, you are gonna like come onto that volcano and set up and you're gonna look at it and you're gonna that's your life. And what a thing in your life to be able to experience a volcano actually erupting.
Yeah.
That is what they live for, all of that. So yeah, it is really cool to see them setting up their equipment. They all come into the town first of all, and they cause a little bit of disruption to this
Mm-hmm.
quiet, peaceful little town. They're disrupting it by all their equipment and their loud trucks and their big things, and now they got to find somewhere to
Yeah.
stay and eat food and all that. And as a matter of fact, the same thing was that happened on Mount St. Helens. This disruption of the people, telling them to evacuate and that sort of thing, caused a lot of a lot of people to protest. That sort of thing
Yep.
happened back in the 80s when this occurred, and You see that in this movie, kind of a little snippet of it when they call the town meeting. This
Yeah.
disruption and chaos happening.
Yeah, and we're reminded really early on is that they're all there to celebrate the fact that their town is, the second best place to live. So in their mind, nothing could be wrong, and we have this award because nothing is wrong. And yeah, and then they put everything on alert because they found the trees, they found the animals, they found the people, dead in the hot springs, and and then of course with the their readings coming back for the seismic readings and the sulfur dioxide and all these things coming back, they put the town on an alert, and people don't like that. They're all in that town meeting, and of course the town leaders are brushing it off.
So the first time they called the town hall meeting when they're upset at everybody, right? The thing that they do that I think is just I mean, they do it then, but think about it. They embarrass this man and humiliate him in front of everybody. Like, shame on you for jumping the gun and moving on your emotions and calling this meeting. And then there's the whisper, this meeting should have never been called. You know what I mean? They're just like, oh, and he lost his credibility like immediately. So what does he go to do? He goes to the bar.
Yep.
He goes to the bar, but because James Bond does not get embarrassed and he just stays on the job. He's not like sulking. He's just like preparing himself for step 2. His boss comes in and sits down and like, let's just drink it out. Let's drink it out and we'll call it good. And the funny thing is there were 2 other movies where the main character screws up and he goes to a bar to drink it out and the boss comes in and tells him everything's gonna be okay. Star Trek and Top
iRobot.
Gun.
Oh.
Both of them, Star
That's
Trek
funny.
and Top Gun, they both did the same exact thing. And I just started laughing when I saw that scene because I'm like, oh, this is such a Hollywood moment.
Well, they did that in iRobot as well. When
They did.
he's in the bar and he's like, dude, come on, what are you doing? You got nothing to go off of anyway. It's
I love
obviously
that.
in real life people go to the bar. That's funny.
Yeah, to drown our sorrows and hope our boss shows up. Tell us it's okay.
Yep, to get our somebody's gotta get it through our heads.
And then the other thing I wanted to talk about too, really quickly, is the helicopter flyover that you were speaking of when they go over to Mount Saint Helens to look at all the activity, and we see the health of the mountain itself, of the actual Mount Saint Helens with the glacier. But
Yep.
I also like that when they get done with the flyover, they're all like, yeah, there's nothing here to indicate any activity. But when they fly over it and there's like nothing to see here, guys. But I'm sorry, you're flying over a volcano where there is steam pouring out of it. In the scene, there's steam pouring out of it. And I'm like,
Yeah.
they maybe shouldn't have used that shot. Because that shows that
Right.
there's definitely activity going on right there.
Right.
So
it's very clearly something's going on with unless you have and even if you've had that vent of steam there for years, you should check that out. Like, mountains don't steam on their own, so, and it's a volcano,
no.
that, so like, do some work, people, check something out.
Yeah. And I just have
But
to step back and say that Mount St. Helens didn't just erupt in 1980. It erupted again, and they knew it was going to erupt because it was steaming. Just saying.
yeah.
So yeah, that was some interesting stuff going on there. And then we also see that before this big eruption happens, a romance forming that is very key in this movie.
Well, it's Sarah Connor and James Bond, so there's gotta be a romance developing.
It has to be. They can't just walk away as friends, even though they live nowhere near each other.
And have nothing to do with each other and no professional connection at all.
They've known each other for like, I'm sorry. Anyway, so there's just romances start. Romances can happen like in the blink of an eye. Let's not put the kibosh on good old fashioned love, okay? But we're in a
Yeah.
professional setting here, and the mayor of the town and the volcanologist should not be loving on each other. But she invites him to dinner, you know? So during this dinner, we learn from both sides. This is where we learn in the plot of the story, the backstories of the love of both of them. So we learn about her tension with her mother-in-law is because the son just like went to the grocery store for a pack of smokes and never came back, like that sort of thing. And then we also learn about James Bond's actual loss. Sorry, I keep calling him that, but I can't help it.
Mm-hmm.
He is.
That's fine.
um,
Yeah,
but we
about his
learn about
wife, which we
his
saw at the beginning of the
loss.
movie.
We learn that he has a job that has him traveling all over the world, and he doesn't have time for love. But then out of nowhere, he finds love in a coworker. And that's a beautiful story. Um,
Yep.
uh, One of the things that made everybody switch from uh this guy should have never called a meeting. He doesn't know what he's talking about. There's nothing going on here, right? And they immediately switched to, we got to evacuate, get out of town, this is going to blow. And what was the thing that made it switch? She went to go grab her daughter a glass of water so that they could get back down to getting down, and it was brown coming out of the sink. And so there's a
Yep.
very specific thing, and I looked that up because I needed to know. I knew this already, but I needed to know what is the thing that was in the water, why such a reaction. Well, when I looked it up, it says when sulfur dioxide gas from a volcano comes into contact with water near a volcano, it readily dissolves, creating a slightly acidic solution, often referred to as volcanic acid, which can significantly impact the local water chemistry and potentially harm aquatic life depending on the concentration. This is a key indicator of volcanic activity nearby and can be used to monitor potential eruptions. So when you see
Yep.
that, bye.
Yeah. Yeah, and he saw that immediately and was just like, nope, another one of those facts about real life that they threw in here that I really like.
Mhm.
So as they're going, they when they put this town on alert, you have people who are being grumpy about it and saying they don't want to go. And the grandma is one of those people. She makes a comment kind of early on that, like, she's not leaving this place anytime soon. And later on, when you actually see, all right, the town, that earthquake happens in the gymnasium, and people are seeing, okay, this actually is something we need to consider. And then they get back home to look for the kids, and there's a note that says, we went up to go get grandma. And I don't know how these kids learned how to drive, but they're doing a pretty good job.
Really good job. Yeah, I also want to jump back into reality as well and talk about Harry Truman, the gentleman that I believe that this grandma character is
It is.
named after, or no, I'm sorry,
Yep.
or is in the movie after. And Harry Truman was also an elderly gentleman that lived on the side of Mount Saint Helens. He moved there shortly after he served in World War One, so you can see how old this dude was. He and his wife had a little lodge on the that he named after his wife. He had a lodge there, and he lived there for 50 years. So he didn't really have anywhere else to go. That was his place. You know what I mean? Like, I
Yep.
get that and why he didn't leave. I honestly do. He didn't have any other family or children or anything like that. So that was just he was going to live it out there. And there's actually I'm going to really try not to get emotional on this one, but when I was doing my research on this, I ran across a recording because they had some like last recordings of some of the volcanologists, and they had a last recording of Harry Truman too, and he was like recording on it was a phone message that he was leaving because we didn't have cell phones back in the 80s, guys, sorry. Um he was leaving a voice message, and he was talking about he could see the landslide happening and everything coming towards him, like he could see it all coming towards him, and then it just went out. So but yeah, he was happy where he lived. He ran that lodge, and he had a store there too, and it was his home. And so I can see how grandma on the mountain, like why she wouldn't go. And to be honest with you, if my grandchildren saw me up there, I could see them jumping in a car and coming to get me. So it's all good. It's all good.
Yeah. You at least wouldn't be so obstinate in that decision though. You'd be like, nope, we got to get out of here. I know enough about
Yeah,
disasters
we're
that we
bolting,
got to go.
guys. I got my bug out bag, and let's bolt.
Yeah, you would be the first one to. You'd see that steam from that, the helicopter shot, and you'd say, nope, we're out. We got to go.
Yep.
Um, yeah, this it is based on Harry R. Truman. He lived obviously on the base of it, but there was a USGS scientist that was like 6 miles away, and they
Yes.
when that landslide happened at Mount Saint Helens, I mean, he died pretty instantly, and it just shows how incredible the force of nature is on these things.
I heard his recording too. And
Hmm.
I also got his backstory. Oh my goodness, I'm gonna tear up. Oh my goodness. I got his backstory too, and he just loved what he did. It was his passion, and he set up camp, and there was some really cool pictures of him. And his last conversation with his team was, "Here we go." That was all he said. That's all
Yeah.
he could get out, and
Yep.
and that was it.
Yeah.
Tragic.
Yeah.
But let's get back into the movie really quick.
Of course,
Yeah.
as the town is evacuating, the kids have gone up to get grandma, to get Ruth. And the now you got me doing it. 007 and Sarah Connor, because I just blanked on their names. They have to go against the flow of traffic of an entire town evacuating to get up the mountain to get to Ruth's house. And
Yes.
they're going against the flow of traffic, and the part that I like, he turns into this river to drive across, because he has his exhaust pipe is up as a snorkel above his windshield, or by his windshield. And
Yeah.
so he's probably done this before. If that's the setup for his engine, he's fine. He's done this before. But
Yeah.
so many cars see him do that and follow him. And what's funny with that is that they're trying to go back up the mountain, and everyone's trying to leave, but they see it as, oh, maybe that's another way. And of course there's drama there where he almost doesn't make it, but then he gets hit by the other car in the river, and that's just enough momentum to get him going again. So
Thank goodness. Sorry
yeah.
about that car, but
And
thank goodness.
right. Yeah, and when they go up to her cabin, she's like, no, I'm not going. And the thing that makes them start going is that the wall opens up with lava pouring into their the cabin, and I thought that happened
Yeah.
pretty quick.
There was a few things that happened here. I don't believe what happened during a volcanic eruption. Some of the things that happened seemed more to happen like during an earthquake. And the cars
Yep,
driving crazy, like the car like drove into people. That was weird. Like why? And then
right,
the lonely child crying on the porch, like, where's your mom? Um,
right.
there was a church steeple that fell and a bridge that fell, and random buildings were falling everywhere. But I don't know. Was that from the earthquake that happened?
Yeah, that would have been from the earthquake, but the thing that got me was that there was already ash falling down, because when the kids were driving up the mountain to get to their grandma, I made a note that like they were driving through this ash pouring down, and I mean, it looked like when you're driving through a blizzard in Minnesota, but the ash I
Oh,
didn't get because
I
it
called
hadn't
them
erupted
at
yet. Yeah.
oh yeah, the
Um.
eruption was some crazy stuff going on there.
Okay, so really quick, the lava comes through her wall, and they go into the boat to get away from it. And they go into the lake, which, like we mentioned earlier, the waters can get acidic, and that sulfur coming up will kill the wildlife, and we see that with all the fish floating up. um One of the things that's a lot more Hollywood than reality is that the acidic levels of that water would not be that high to eat through metal. Um, but that's okay for
Yeah.
Hollywood's sake. Um,
I would think that they would eat through her
and
flesh a lot faster than the metal. It seemed to me just to
yeah,
say that.
yeah, and the other thing I don't get is when so Ruth jumps out of the boat to save them. The dock is right there, and she just trudges through the water. She could have jumped out of the boat and went 3 steps and then climbed up on the dock and then pulled
I
them through.
agree.
And
I
she
agree.
and because that's what they did. That's what they did. And the whole time they were running on the dock for free, she was just trudging through screaming. And it's like, what are you doing? That part always
In
bugs me.
front of your grandchildren, I would never.
But oh yeah,
Oh my
we
goodness.
know
So
that.
I wanted to
Yeah, we know
I
that.
want to say a couple of things about reality here also, because I love reality in some of this stuff. In the actual explosion of Mount Saint Helens, the cloud expanded in all directions at an average of 155 miles an hour for the first 13 minutes, and then it's fast, and then it's kind of slows down, right? The initial
Hmm.
was the initial was 155 miles an hour. So in the first 13 minutes, it traveled 38 miles. Okay, that's the ash cloud. So keep that in mind when you think about seeing these ash clouds and how fast you have to go. And I don't know, like I just think like the Hollywood part of it, they make that timeline be so much faster than the reality of it. But the other thing I wanted to
Yeah.
mention too was in the scene where we looked at the glacier melting. They did like a really quick shot of like the glaciers melting, and then there's a mudslide.
Yep.
So in fact, what actually happened when Mount Saint Helens erupted, there's a thing called a lahar. And a lahar
Yep.
is when the snow on top of the mountain melts and then it rushes down the river, or rushes down the mountain and creates a mudslide along the way. And it did this on Mount St. Helens, and it traveled 110 miles an hour and moved across Spirit Lake. Part of the cloud hit an 11,000 foot high ridge, and that was 6 miles north of the actual mountain. So the Lahar part of there, I like that they added that into the movie because that's pretty realistic to have happen during a volcanic eruption on a mountain like that.
I had it in my notes, that info on the Lahar for Mount Saint Helens, so thank you for bringing that up.
Of course.
And so yeah, we go through them trying to get out, and with the Lanai flooding, they show that here with the dam breaking and overflowing, um and I was watching that here, and I thought that looked really, really good because this was the time when most of this was done through models or through
Yeah,
practical effects. So, but it holds up. I don't know what's, but it looks really good, and it totally holds up too. It doesn't come off as cheesy or bad CGI. I mean, they did a really good job with the details of that. Um,
they did.
and it's not intended to be comedic, um, but in that there's the crew, the scientists going over the bridge, and the bridge is starting to collapse, and the part that's not supposed to be comedic but I found to be, I don't know, not funny, but like, okay, so the guy in the orange, he's the last one in the van. He put no effort into getting out of that van and less effort getting off the bridge. He literally, at one point, he just stood there.
He gave
He
up.
just he
I've
did.
seen
He
this in other
totally did.
movies
He just
also. I've seen this in
yeah.
other
So
movies.
and
2012. I think San Andreas Fault that happened. There's a number of disaster movies where they have the one guy who sacrifices himself and just gives up his life and just doesn't try at all, and that's the most dramatic death in the entire movie. It's great.
it is ruined by the Wilhelm scream of him falling into the water off the bridge.
You're right.
I couldn't. I had to pause it and literally say, "Really?" Because of it is the most
Yeah,
comedic sound bit you can do for a death, and it's in so many movies. Um,
it's
but
funny.
yeah,
I
it's
love it.
just the Wilhelm scream, which then goes into the lava scene, um, and
Oh, that's my favorite scene of the whole movie.
I'll rant about it.
What kind of truck were you driving? I want that truck. No, I don't even want the truck. I want the tires on that truck. Goodyear, did you do that? Because I don't know
It
any
was
tire
Michelin
company in
for
the
sure.
world. How do you explain spinning out on lava? That's impossible.
What I want to know is what that gas tank was made out of.
Titanium for
Okay.
sure.
That truck would have exploded so quickly. I understand the tires would
Yeah.
melt in seconds because it's rubber. I get that. That gas tank is okay. Maybe that's an older truck. I'm going to say maybe the gas tank was metal.
Because you're on some freaking lava, and lava is hot. It's hot lava.
Well, I think what
So,
happens when gasoline is superheated by lava, I think it becomes inflammable at that point and nothing can happen to it. That's the key.
oh,
When we light matches
it
around gasoline,
evaporates. It evaporates. Yes,
so dumb.
that's true. That's true.
Yeah. So yeah, the truck makes it totally fine. Yeah. And then it goes into them driving away, the explosion. The effects on that are great, by the way. The actual explosion or the eruption. Um,
Yeah,
the
not
I
bad.
and you'll see in the picture here of Mount Saint Helens of the pyroclastic cloud eruption, and it just
Yeah,
towers in the sky, and that's what we saw here. So I like that they did that. Um,
miles, miles
yeah,
and miles into the sky. Yeah, that cloud covered the United States for like 3 days.
it if I'm not mistaken, the cloud of ash in the sky wrapped around the entire Earth, and then it lowered the temperature as well, which is crazy. And then the them going into the mine, uh
Yeah.
one great place to hide, kind of. um but also it showed that earlier on in the movie because the sun gets kind of reprimanded for hanging out in the mines because it's obviously not safe. But he ends up saving them because he's got like food and snacks and flashlights and stuff in there that, like, hey, it's the perfect place to be. So that was good on him.
Yeah. I want to point out really quick that there was a family, a man, a woman, and their two children that were caught up in this eruption of Mount Saint Helens back in the 80s. And they were just out hiking, just out having a great day. But like I mentioned, like the cloud from Mount Saint Helens extended for miles from its base. So you could have been 15 miles away and thought you were safe, and you were not. And that's what happened with this family. And they ended up finding a cabin which protected them from like the big fallout, but it didn't protect them from uh the inhalation
Inhalation.
of all of the ashes and stuff like that. So they were trying to keep their children awake by pinching them to make them cry. And they ended up walking out of there for I don't remember how many miles they had to walk to get out of there. But they did make it out with their children, so it's a pretty incredible story. So this story
Yeah.
of them in the mine is plausible. That's why I like it. It's plausible, you know.
Yep. Yep. And then of course, so he goes into his truck to get that ELF machine, and there's a rock collapse there, a mine collapse, and that truck, it would have been. I don't get claustrophobic, at least I don't think I do, but that would have done it for me because the roof of the truck was touching his face, and
Yeah.
I don't know if you noticed, but from that point, it cuts to his team, and there's a little blinking light, and he goes, "How long has that been on?" He goes, "I don't know, a day or two."
A minute. So number one, they knew it was blinking and did nothing about it. What?
A
Yeah.
day, yeah, like but I don't know. You yada yada through the fact that he was sitting with the roof of his truck against his face and the head, he was stuck in there for 2 days because your
No food,
team
no
is just
water.
like, oh, what's that light? I don't know.
Meh.
Anyway,
Yes.
so
Yeah.
yeah, that was I saw that. I was like, wait, really? You skimmed over the fact that it's been 2 days and you just like ignore that blinking light from equipment that is at an active volcano that you sent
Light
researchers to
saving.
because it was, but they
That
got
should
him
be the
out,
one and
and that's
only
the
thing that
important
you're
part,
looking at. Yeah.
right? You should have a team of people
Oh,
staring at that box to wait for that light to go off.
I know. I
But
love
yeah,
Hollywoods because they can just blow it off like, oh, it's no big thing. I'm sure they're fine.
yeah, it's crazy. Um,
I love it so much.
yeah. So we'll wrap it up here, but I just really quick, I wanted to do a quick shout out to Movo for the use of their microphone. This mic that I have here is a Movo UM6, and so far it has been really good. So thank you guys for that. And Mom, I know that you've got some Movo equipment coming to your house as well. Uh,
I
so
do.
um,
Very excited.
so if you guys want to check them out, we have links that will be posted in this video, as well as our Instagram, as well as our personal pages if you end up finding those. Um, but thank you guys so much for joining us today for this review of Dante's Peak. We're going to be doing some other disaster movies here in the next few weeks. And I'm actually going to be in the same state as my mom here coming up. So the next video or two will probably be us in the same room together, which is really good because that hasn't happened in quite a while. So, all right. Anything else you got to say?
Just thanks for having me as always, Tyler. This movie was near and dear to my heart, and I am so excited to do more. Thank you again for having me. You're great.
Thank you all so much for listening to It's a Classic. If you like it and want to hear more, please follow us on Instagram and YouTube at It's a Classic Film Podcast. You can also rate us on Spotify, which really helps. So join us while we discuss our next movie and see why we think it's a classic. Well, for us it is.